You've interviewed 5, 6, maybe 10 people, good conversations, solid resumes, some genuinely impressive candidates, and you've still not made a hire. That's not a talent problem. That is a process problem, and most founders don't realize they have it until they're 3 months in and the role is still open. I'm Beck. I run Recruitment, a boutique agency in Melbourne specializing in marketing, digital and e-commerce talent for beauty, fashion and lifestyle brands. This scenario comes up constantly in my world. Good candidates, strong interviews and no decision. Founders walk away from those conversations confused, wondering if the market's dried up or whether they're being too picky. In most cases, neither is actually the issue. Let me walk you through how I usually see this unfold. You open up a role, you post it somewhere, or you reach out to a few people. Applications come in and you shortlist a handful of candidates and start having conversations. The interviews go reasonably well, you're engaged, you can see potential in a few of them, and then you hit this wall. Nobody clearly stands out, everyone is fine, good even, but there's this niggling feeling that something's off and you can't quite put your finger on what it is. So you keep going, you keep scheduling conversations, you keep waiting for the obvious answer to show up. And weeks pass, the role stays open, the team absorbs the gap, and you start quietly wondering if maybe your expectations are just too high. When a strong process is working, the right candidate becomes obvious. When it's not, everyone starts to look the same. At this point, most founders start turning the lens onto themselves. Am I being too picky? Is it just the market right now? Maybe I need to lower the bar a little bit. And that's where things start to unravel, because when you lower the bar to resolve ambiguity, you haven't solved the problem and you might just end up hiring it. 6 months later, you're dealing with underperformance, misalignment, or a resignation. And the cost of that is time, money, and progress. What I actually see in these situations is the process itself generating the ambiguity, not the talent pool and not the market. Something in the way the role is defined, the way you're sourcing, or the way you're assessing candidates is constantly producing almost right as the output. There are 3 places this breaks down. They rarely show up in isolation, usually 2 or 3 operating at once. 1, the role isn't properly calibrated. This is probably the most common one. It creates the most downstream damage. A lot of roles I see are trying to do too much. You're asking for strategy and execution, leadership and hands-on delivery, creative thinking and performance analysis, all in one person. And I understand why, because in a scaling brand, the gaps are real and the pressure to fill multiple needs with one hire is enormous. What it creates though is a talent pool full of people who each tick some of the boxes, but nobody ticks all of them. So you end up comparing trade-offs instead of evaluating fit. Someone's a great executor, but not a strategic leader. Someone has the strategic brain, but isn't quite hands-on enough or doesn't want to be, and every candidate feels like compromise. I covered this in more detail in my video on combining leadership and execution in one role. The short version is that hybrid roles shrink your candidate pool significantly, often without founders realizing it, because you're not looking for one person from a broad market, you're looking for a very specific unicorn from a much smaller one. Calibrate the role properly before you start the search, getting clear on what's truly essential versus what's aspirational. This is the first place to look when nothing else feels right. The second reason is you're looking in the wrong part of the market. If a job ad is your primary sourcing strategy, you're automatically looking at the most visible part of the talent market, not the best part. The strongest candidates, the ones who are actually getting things done, they're not sitting on Seek refreshing their job alerts. They are performing, they're being paid to stay. Some of them haven't thought about leaving until the right conversation lands in front of them. So what a job ad gives you is whoever's actually looking right now. And that pool skews heavily towards people who are between positions, recently made redundant, or unhappy enough to be searching. That's not a reason to discount them. Genuinely strong candidates do show up through ads, but it's a narrow window into the market. When you're only accessing that window, the almost right feeling is almost guaranteed, because you're not looking at all the other options in the market. I go into this in detail in my video about what to do before you post a job ad. The principle is simple. The sourcing strategy determines the quality of who shows up. If the strategy is passive, the results will be too. Reason 3, no structured process in assessing performance. This is the one that quietly causes the most damage because it's invisible until you've already made the wrong call. Most interviews are conversational. There's no real framework. You're asking questions, having a discussion, getting a feel for the person, and what conversational interviews tend to reward is polish. Someone who interviews well feels like a strong candidate, even when the actual evidence of capability is thin. And so you leave the conversation thinking, I really liked them, but I'm not sure. That uncertainty isn't your gut picking up on something. It is a signal that you don't have enough data to make a confident decision. A structured assessment process gives you that data. Portfolio review, a scenario-based task, a defined sourcing matrix that everyone in the room is working from. These aren't box-ticking exercises. They're what shifts a conversation from subjective to evidence-based. Without that structure, you're relying on feeling, and feelings produce ambiguous outcomes, especially when 2 or 3 candidates are all broadly similar on the surface. I use a predictive interview framework with every single search, and the difference it makes to the decision-making conversation with founders is significant. When someone's being assessed on actual capability, not just how well they present, the path forward becomes a lot faster and a lot clearer. So what a strong process actually does. When all 3 of these things are working properly, the role is calibrated, the sourcing reaches the right part of the market, and the assessment is genuinely structured. Something shifts in the whole process. You stop comparing trade-offs and start evaluating fit. The right person becomes obvious. Decisions don't drag, they move quickly, and that speed protects your brand because the best candidates don't wait forever. Without fixing this, the loop continues. More interviews, more second guessing, more delayed decisions. The role stays open longer than it should, and the team absorbs the pressure. And eventually you either settle for someone who you weren't fully confident in, or you start again from scratch, often 3 to 6 months later. That cost isn't always visible on a spreadsheet, but the lost momentum, the team burnout, and the missed growth window is real. If you're sitting with a role that's been open longer than it should have been, and you've interviewed people you genuinely would consider strong, but you still haven't made a decision, look at your process. Is the role calibrated properly? Are you reaching the right people in the market? And do you have a structured way to assess performance? Those 3 questions will tell you a lot. If you want to work through what that looks like for your specific role or your search, reach out. This is exactly the conversations that I have with new clients. Hiring shouldn't feel uncertain when the process is right. It doesn't. If you found this video valuable, let me know in the comments what you most liked, and make sure you subscribe to watch the next one.